They didn't expect the curtain to fall. They built their illusions carefully, layer upon layer of false kindness, forced apologies, polished reputations. They spent years perfecting their act, believing performance was the same as power. But masks only work when no one's watching closely. You started watching. You started noticing the pauses between their words, the tension behind their smiles, the small cracks they thought went unnoticed. You didn't confront them. You observed. That's what scared them. Observation without reaction is the most dangerous silence. You didn't shout or accuse. You simply saw. And once something has been seen, it can't return to illusion. You pulled back the final curtain, and suddenly the truth stood there, bare, trembling, exposed. The stage lights turned harsh, not on you, but on them. They forgot the oldest rule of deception: lies thrive in secrecy, but truth thrives in exposure. You became that exposure personified. They played with perception. That was their first mistake. They thought appearances would save them, that image could outlast integrity. They spent so long perfecting how they looked that they forgot how to be real. But you had grown beyond surface-level charm. You stopped being impressed by titles, possessions, and performances. You wanted substance, and in your search for it, you accidentally dismantled their entire structure. The truth was never loud. It was patient. It waited for you to see through the patterns, and when you did, their power dissolved. They depended on collective blindness. They built their confidence on manipulation, on others not asking questions. You asked questions. You connected dots they thought were scattered. You saw the story under the story. You saw the predator dressed as victim, the victim pretending to be savior. You saw all of it, and when the curtain fell, they weren't exposed by your anger. They were exposed by their own reflection. You didn't need to scream the truth. You just needed to stand in it. People underestimate how powerful silence becomes when it carries understanding. You stopped defending yourself, and that shift made everything collapse. Because when you stop explaining, liars lose their anchor. They can't exist without reaction. They need someone to argue with, to manipulate, to confuse. You denied them that. You gave them no access to your energy. You pulled the curtain not by confrontation, but by withdrawal. When you stopped playing their game, they had to play alone. And that's when the audience noticed. They looked foolish, desperate, incoherent. The exposure wasn't theatrical, it was psychological. They exposed themselves trying to explain your calm. They revealed their guilt trying to deny what you never accused them of. You became a mirror, and mirrors are cruel to those who live in pretense. Their downfall was simply you choosing to see clearly. They tried to control the narrative, but truth is ungovernable. Once it starts unraveling, it drags everything with it. Their stories stopped aligning, their alliances began to crumble, and the people they used started remembering details they weren't supposed to. That's what exposure does. It doesn't need announcement, it multiplies through contradiction. You didn't need to prove they were false. They did that by existing in the same light they once feared. Every manipulator believes they're untouchable until transparency arrives. They think exposure means scandal, but it's quieter than that. It's the small shift when people stop believing them. It's the moment their words lose weight. You didn't destroy them. You removed the fog that protected them. You didn't punish them. You revealed what was always there. The truth didn't need your rage, it needed your patience. And when patience matured, exposure followed like gravity. They thought they could outrun consequence. No one can. They called you paranoid when you noticed the patterns. They said you were dramatic when you described the tension. They dismissed your intuition as overthinking. That's how manipulators survive. They weaponize your awareness against you. But you kept your clarity. You didn't argue, you documented. You paid attention when they thought you were distracted. Every lie they told became a breadcrumb. Every manipulation became a note in your mental archive. You weren't seeking revenge, you were seeking understanding. You didn't know it at the time, but that understanding was building an invisible weapon: awareness. And awareness, once sharp enough, slices through illusion effortlessly. When the curtain finally fell, they didn't just lose your trust. They lost the audiences. You became the proof they hoped no one would find. You didn't expose them out of spite. You exposed them by evolving. You outgrew their control, and evolution always exposes what refuses to grow. Their downfall wasn't public, it was internal. Exposure doesn't always happen in headlines. Sometimes it happens in silence. The kind that follows when people realize they've been messled. The kind that spreads through glances and doubt. They can't erase that now. You didn't need revenge, because their own reputations began to dissolve naturally. Truth has a way of rearranging loyalty without announcement. People started distancing themselves, conversations changed, energy shifted. That's exposure, not the destruction of image, but the evaporation of illusion. They lost their grip not because you attacked, but because you no longer feared them. Fear fuels false power. When you stopped feeding it, they started starving. They can rebuild a lie, but they can't rebuild credibility. You didn't take anything from them. They took everything from themselves. You just made it visible. And that visibility was the one thing they never prepared for. You were meant to break the pattern. That's why they fought so hard to silence you. You weren't just challenging one lie. You were threatening an entire structure of deceit. They needed you compliant, doubting yourself, questioning your sanity. But healing made you dangerous. You learned to trust your instincts again. You began to see that manipulation is predictable when you understand fear. You stopped reacting to their triggers, and that broke their rhythm. They relied on your confusion. They collapsed under your clarity. When you pulled back the final curtain, it wasn't revenge, it was revelation. You didn't just expose people, you exposed dynamics, cycles, systems. You saw that their power never came from truth. It came from your willingness to believe them. Once you withdrew belief, the illusion fell apart. They had no script without your participation. You were their stage. And when you stepped off, their play ended mid-scene. Now they wander without narrative. Exposure does that. It erases identity built on deceit. They don't know who to be without control. They thought exposure would ruin you, but it liberated you. You stopped chasing closure because exposure gave it to you naturally. You no longer needed apologies, truth became enough. You stopped explaining what happened. Time did the explaining for you. That's the cruel beauty of revelation. It requires no vengeance. You simply live in alignment, and everything out of alignment falls away. Their downfall was silent but absolute. They can't undo what's been seen. Every lie they told now echoes differently. Every act of manipulation now looks desperate. You didn't have to lift a finger, the truth carried its own momentum. That's why exposure feels divine. It balances what ego once distorted. You became the equalizer, not through anger, but through awareness. They built their empire on illusion. You made it transparent. You became the consequence they didn't calculate. They prepared for your reaction, but they didn't prepare for your evolution. They were ready to fight a wounded version of you. Instead, they met someone healed, calm, and indifferent that disarmed them completely. Because exposure through composure feels surgical. It cuts cleanly, without noise. You didn't reveal the truth to destroy anyone. You revealed it because lies had no place in your new frequency. Your silence carried more weight than confrontation ever could. You didn't just survive their deceit. You transcended it. They can't touch what no longer exists on their level. Their fear now is not that you'll speak, but that you won't, because your silence forces them to live with their reflection unfiltered. You became what they feared most, a witness who no longer participates. You don't chase justice, you embody it. An embodiment terrifies those who only know how to perform it. They expect strength to roar, to be loud, visible, theatrical. They expect clenched fists and burning eyes. They wait for noise because noise is easy to recognize. But real strength rarely announces itself. It lives in the silence after chaos, in the moments no one witnesses. True strength is the quiet decision. To stay when running would be easier, to forgive when resentment feels righteous, to rise when no one is watching. You made that decision countless times while they were busy counting your scars. They thought you were retreating, but you were choosing. They mistook stillness for weakness, but stillness was your forge. The loud ones break first because they depend on validation to feel powerful. You don't. Your strength exists in that invisible pause between reaction and response. You don't need to prove it. You just live it. And living strength silently will always outlast those who perform it loudly. They never saw the moment it happened. The shift was quiet, imperceptible. It didn't come with victory speeches or revenge fantasies. It came one morning when you woke up and realized you didn't feel the need to fight anymore. That was the decision. You stopped letting noise control you. You stopped letting emotion dictate movement. You became selective with your energy. The battles you once entered out of pride, you now decline out of peace. They confuse that peace for apathy, but it's evolution. You learned that sometimes strength is saying nothing. Sometimes it's walking away from an argument that used to consume you. Sometimes it's allowing them to misunderstand you without correction. True strength is choosing clarity over chaos, dignity over dominance, direction over drama. You stopped needing to win every exchange because you realized you'd already won. The moment you stopped playing games designed to drain you, you built this version of yourself quietly. No one saw the nights you wanted to break, but chose stillness instead. No one saw how many times you bit your tongue, not because you were weak, but because you valued your peace more than your point. That's strength. They don't teach that kind. They teach resistance through noise, not endurance through silence. You learn that reacting makes you predictable, and silence makes you powerful. You discovered that not every insult deserves acknowledgement. Not every betrayal deserves reaction. True strength comes from restraint, the ability to hold your energy when your ego wants release. You mastered that discipline slowly, painfully, consistently. They saw the calm, but not the cost. And that's the secret. They'll never understand how much energy it takes to stay composed. They'll never know that silence, for you, is an absence. It's control. Every quiet choice you made was a brick in the empire you're now building. There was a time you thought strength meant fighting back. You thought defending yourself in every argument was necessary. You thought proving your worth to people who doubted it was power. But over time, you realized real power has no audience. The strongest moments happen when no one's there to praise them. The decision to walk away from chaos, to stay calm in provocation, to remain unshaken when insulted, that's strength. You stopped performing pain for empathy. You stopped defending peace to those who profit from disruption. They thought they could trigger you like before, but the old buttons don't work anymore. You rewired yourself. That's what frightens them most, because your strength is quiet, consistent, and irreversible. You no longer rely on validation, you rely on awareness. You no longer fight to be heard, you speak only when it matters. That restraint, that stillness, that choice, that's the kind of strength that endures. People mistake the quiet decision for passivity. They think silence means surrender. But you learn that true strength doesn't need recognition. It only needs results. You understood that emotions can be manipulated, but decisions cannot. Every time you chose stillness over reaction, you denied someone the satisfaction of control. They wanted chaos, you gave them composure. They wanted war, you gave them nothing. Nothing is terrifying to people who thrive on reaction. They cannot fight stillness. It mirrors them back too clearly. You became their consequence by choosing peace when they expected aggression. You taught yourself that the highest form of discipline is patience, and patience is the language of strength. It's the ability to wait while others waste themselves. You don't need to raise your voice. Your presence already does the talking. They don't understand yet, but one day they'll realize. Silence is the sound of power mastering itself. You stopped being reactive the moment you saw how easily others were controlled by it. You began to study energy, not emotion. You learned that most conflicts don't require answers. They require absence. You withdrew strategically. They called it detachment, but it was awareness. You saw how quickly noise becomes a trap. Arguments go in circles because egos feed them. You refuse to participate. You made the quiet decision to stop explaining yourself to the blind. You stopped trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding. That's what they couldn't handle, because their control depended on your reaction. You took that away. They can't provoke peace. They can't twist silence. You became unplayable, and that's the purest form of strength, being unbothered in a world addicted to chaos. The quiet decision is not weakness. It's the evolution of focus. You stopped reacting and started ruling. And rulers never shout. They used to think you were fragile. They measured strength through display, through aggression, through dominance. But you saw the flaw in that illusion. Real power is steady. It doesn't need to prove itself through volume. You became that still power. You understood that some of the strongest decisions are invisible. The choice to forgive without reconciliation, to move forward without closure, to stay silent while being misunderstood. Each of those moments built you quietly. They didn't see the transformation because it happened beneath expression. You no longer act from ego, you act from awareness. That's why your calm feels threatening. They're used to emotional reactions they can manipulate. But now, when they push, you don't move. When they lie, you don't explain. When they provoke, you don't respond. Your silence exposes them better than confrontation ever could. That's the power of quiet strength. It dismantles chaos without lifting a hand. They called your calm emotionless because they couldn't recognize peace. They think intensity means truth, but you learn that truth doesn't need force. It stands alone. The quiet decision is faith in alignment. It's knowing that what's meant to remain will withstand silence, and what collapses under silence was never real. You stopped chasing validation, and that created distance between you and the reactive. They live in urgency, you live in certainty. You no longer feel the need to rush responses or prove integrity. You know who you are now. That certainty terrifies them, because people who know themselves are uncontrollable. You no longer feed into emotional manipulation, and that drains their influence. You make decisions without discussion, and that offends those who depended on your approval. But power doesn't ask permission, it acts. You don't announce change anymore, you embody it. That's the quiet decision. To move without explanation and still shift everything around you. True strength often looks like indifference, but it's far from it. You still feel deeply. You've just learned how to choose what deserves your energy. You've learned how to process emotion without turning it into performance. That's the distinction between reactive and resilient. They wanted to break your calm because calm cannot be exploited. You built that composure brick by brick through disappointments, betrayals, and long nights of silence. You learned that chaos has no power over those who observe it instead of absorbing it. You used to meet fire with fire, but now you meet it with stillness. That choice doesn't make you passive. It makes you strategic. They haven't realized yet that silence burns hotter than rage when it comes from awareness. You don't need to destroy them. They destroy themselves against your calm. That's the cruelty of composure. It feels effortless, but it's earned through war. They thrived when everything was burning. They didn't want peace, they wanted movement, noise, collapse. Because chaos gave them purpose. It gave them a stage. Parasites never feed on stillness, it kills them. They needed you unsteady, questioning yourself, tangled in confusion. They created storms just to drink the rain. You began to notice the pattern. Every time you found balance, something, some argument, some rumor, some subtle insult, appeared to knock you off course. It wasn't coincidence. It was hunger. They couldn't survive without the emotional oxygen your reactions provided. When you were calm, they felt invisible. When you were hurt, they came alive. You were their battery. But they underestimated the day you learned to unplug. The day you realized chaos wasn't natural, it was engineered. You began to starve them not by fighting back, but by going still. That silence suffocated what once drained you. They mistook your peace for distance. It was execution. They lived off your confusion. The way you'd overthink every word, replay every conversation, search for logic in madness. You wanted to fix things. They wanted to keep them broken. Because brokenness gave them leverage. They'd say they hated drama, but they'd always be the first to mention it. They'd tell you they wanted peace, but they couldn't exist without tension. You didn't know it then, but they were addicted to emotional electricity, the highs and lows that made them feel significant. Your exhaustion was their comfort zone. The more you tried to stabilize, the more they provoked. That's what parasites do. They keep the host alive just enough to keep feeding. When you finally detached, they panicked. They started guilt-tripping, rewriting history, pretending concern. But you'd seen too much. You recognized their patterns for what they were: survival tactics. Parasites never love their hosts. They only love what they can extract. They hid behind empathy. They called it checking in, when it was really surveillance. They asked questions not to understand you, but to locate your weakness. They smiled during your breakdowns because pain made you pliable. Every act of care came with a string. They wanted to know when you were hurting, so they could insert themselves back into control. You thought they wanted to help, but they wanted to harvest. You started to see it in their timing. They always appeared when things were falling apart, never when things were calm. Because stability starves predators. They don't know how to exist in light. They feed on disorder because it keeps them superior. When you healed, they called you selfish. When you found peace, they called you distant. Because your peace exposed their dependency. They didn't want you whole. They wanted you wounded. They called it connection. But connection built on chaos is just control with a prettier name. The psychology of parasites is simple. They mimic necessity. They make you believe you need them. They attach themselves to your rhythm and then disrupt it. At first, they seem comforting, even helpful. They listen, they nod, they offer advice. But that advice always plants doubt. That concern always tightens control. Over time, you realize they only respond to your pain, never your joy. They'll stay silent when you're doing well, because wellness gives them nothing to attach to. But the moment something goes wrong, they reappear. They say all the right words, but you feel it. The undertone of satisfaction beneath their pity. They love watching you depend. It's psychological feeding. They thrive on the energy of distress. You started to notice that your worst moments coincided with their presence. When you finally withdrew and stopped sharing, they grew restless. They didn't miss you. They missed the meal. They camouflage as supporters, but they're collectors. They collect your secrets, your insecurities, your triggers. Not out of empathy, but ammunition. They study you quietly, waiting for the moment to use your truth against you. They'll call it helping you grow. But growth under their watch always shrinks you. They can't survive your confidence. They prefer you questioning everything about yourself. You started realizing that your peace made them uncomfortable. Your clarity made them defensive. Because clarity breaks manipulation. You learned to stop confiding. You learned that privacy is power. The moment you became selective with your vulnerability, they began to suffocate. They can't attach to what's contained. They call you cold now, but what they mean is they can no longer feed. You didn't lose empathy. You built immunity, and that immunity became poison to every parasite that mistook your kindness for a feeding ground. You started noticing their patterns like clockwork. Every time something went wrong, they'd appear out of nowhere, pretending concern, performing empathy. But when life was good, they disappeared. They needed your struggle to feel useful. They needed your instability to feel superior. Their kindness wasn't compassion. It was strategy. They wanted front row seats to your chaos so they could play the role of savior. They wanted to remind you subtly that peace didn't last without them, that you'd always need their insight, their advice, their presence. You almost believed it once. But now you see how survival for them meant keeping you dependent. Every time you healed, they'd poke the wound. Every time you glowed, they'd dim the light. They weren't feeding on your body, they were feeding on your spirit. But parasites always forget one thing: the host learns. You learn to close the gates. They can't drink what you no longer pour. You saw how chaos was their language. They'd twist truth, start rumors, create tension just to keep the air toxic. They needed that environment to stay relevant. Because peace makes parasites irrelevant. You stopped engaging. You stopped explaining. You stopped trying to prove who you were. That's when they began to unravel. Without your energy, they started feeding on each other. Their alliances crumbled because parasites can't coexist without a host. They turn on one another. That's when you understood real power. It's not revenge, it's removal. You didn't need to fight them. You just needed to stop participating. Their exposure came naturally once you withdrew. They look weaker now, but not because you destroyed them. They destroyed themselves trying to find new chaos to survive in. Parasites can only live in infection. You became immune. and immunity is what they fear most. They used to think they were superior because they could manipulate emotion. But manipulation is a crutch for the powerless. They depended on your reactions for purpose. They mistook control for intelligence. You started to see through their facade. You realized they weren't powerful. They were parasitic. Their only skill was draining. They didn't build, they consumed. They didn't inspire, they infected. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, you took their power source. They can't weaponize silence. They can't twist absence. You stopped feeding their ego, and they began to starve. You didn't need confrontation. Inside, every person exists two versions. The one you show the world, and the one you keep hidden. Your alter ego is that hidden self, the version of you that holds your true power, your raw potential, your unfiltered thoughts. Think of it like a superhero's secret identity. But instead of wearing a cape, this version of you wears absolute confidence, unshakable belief, and zero apologies for its power. It's not about being fake. It's about accessing a stronger, more authentic version of yourself that you've kept locked away. Most people confuse having an alter ego with being fake. But here's the truth. Your alter ego is actually more real than the polite, restrained version you show the world. It's the you that exists before social conditioning, before all those be nice and don't rock the boat lessons took root. When someone tells you to just be yourself, they're usually asking you to be the version they're comfortable with. Your alter ego? That's the version that makes them uncomfortable because it refuses to play small. Creating an alter ego isn't about making up a new personality. It's about stripping away the artificial limitations you've accepted. It's like taking off weights you didn't know you were wearing. Maybe your normal self hesitates to speak up in meetings, but your alter ego, it says exactly what needs to be said. Your regular self might worry about what others think, but your alter ego understands that other people's opinions are their problem, not yours. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you really are. The process of developing your alter ego starts with a simple question. What would I do if I wasn't afraid? Not just physical fear, but all those social fears. Fear of judgment, fear of standing out, fear of being too much. Your alter ego is the answer to that question. It's the version of you that acts on pure instinct and clarity, unburdened by worry about fitting in or keeping others comfortable. This isn't about being reckless. It's about being real. When your alter ego emerges, people notice something different about you. The change is subtle but profound. Your voice carries more authority. Your decisions become clearer. Your boundaries become stronger. It's like watching someone switch from playing a part to directing their own movie. This shift makes people nervous because they can sense you're no longer following the usual social script. You're writing your own. The beauty of an alter ego lies in its protective power. When someone criticizes you, your alter ego understands they're just revealing their own limitations. When someone tries to make you feel small, your alter ego sees through their tactics. It's like having an emotional bulletproof vest. The shots still come, but they don't penetrate. This level of mental freedom terrifies people who rely on social pressure to maintain control. Your alter ego becomes your greatest teacher. Through it, you learn which of your so-called limitations are real and which are just stories you've been told. Can't speak in public? Your alter ego proves that's false. Not leadership material? Your alter ego shows otherwise. Every time you let this stronger version of you take the wheel, you discover that another can't was actually just a haven't yet. The intimidation starts when others realize they can no longer predict or control your responses. Your alter ego breaks their comfortable patterns of interaction. They say something designed to make you doubt yourself, but instead of shrinking, you grow stronger. They try to set boundaries for you, but your alter ego sets its own. This unpredictability makes them uncomfortable because it shifts the power dynamic. Suddenly, they're the ones feeling uncertain. As your alter ego grows stronger, you start recognizing the games people play. You see how they use subtle manipulation, social pressure, and unspoken rules to keep others in line. But because your alter ego operates outside these rules, these tactics stop working on you. It's like being able to see the matrix. Once you recognize the patterns, you can't unsee them. And more importantly, you can't be controlled by them. The ultimate power of your alter ego isn't in making others uncomfortable. It's in making you comfortable with your own potential. It shows you that you can be more, do more, achieve more than the limited version you've been playing. And yes, this realization intimidates people who prefer the old, predictable you. But that's not your problem to solve. Your alter ego isn't a mask you wear to hide. It's armor you wear to become more of who you truly are. Society loves putting people in neat little boxes, doesn't it? Good, bad, right, wrong. Simple categories for simple minds. But your true self doesn't fit in their pre-made containers. What they call your alter ego is actually just you without their restrictions, you without their labels, you without their permission. When you stop asking, who should I be, and start declaring, this is who I am, that's when you become truly dangerous to their system of control. Owning your authentic self means accepting parts of you that make others uncomfortable. Maybe you think too deeply, feel too intensely, question too persistently. Society wants to sand down these sharp edges, make you smooth and safe. But these supposedly problematic traits, they're actually your greatest strengths. Your alter ego understands this. It's not about being difficult. It's about being real. Sometimes being yourself is the most radical act of rebellion. Strength isn't always about being tough. Sometimes it's about having the courage to show vulnerability when everyone expects you to be bulletproof. Your alter ego isn't just about power. It's about authenticity in all its forms. When you stop pretending to be unbreakable and start showing your scars while standing tall, you demonstrate a kind of strength that most people can't comprehend. Breaking free from social programming requires understanding the difference between rules and reality. Most people accept limitations without questioning why they exist. But your true self, your so-called alter ego, sees these boundaries for what they are: imaginary lines drawn by those who benefit from your containment. Once you realize most social norms are just suggestions disguised as laws, you start moving through the world differently. Think about how children play before society teaches them to doubt themselves. They don't question whether they're worthy, whether they're too much, whether they're doing it right. They simply express themselves fully, without filters or fear. Your alter ego is about reclaiming that natural state of being. It's not about becoming something new. It's about returning to something original, something pure that existed before the world taught you to play small. Every time you express your authentic self, you create ripples in the social fabric. People don't know how to handle someone who refuses to follow the unwritten rules of engagement. They've been taught that certain thoughts shouldn't be spoken, certain questions shouldn't be asked, certain boundaries shouldn't be crossed. When you do these things anyway, with confidence and clarity, you force them to question their own compliance. The real power move isn't in hiding your true nature. It's in revealing it strategically. Your alter ego isn't a mask you wear. It's a mask you remove when you choose to show people who you really are. This level of authentic self-expression terrifies those who've built their entire identity around being what others expect. They can sense the freedom in your truth, and it makes them question their own chains. Understanding yourself fully means accepting both light and shadow. Society wants you to present only your polished, acceptable parts. But true strength comes from integrating every aspect of who you are. Your alter ego knows that your so-called flaws, your quirks, your intensity, these aren't bugs in your programming. They're features. They're what make you uniquely capable of changing the game entirely. Most people spend their lives trying to fit into spaces too small for their spirit. They trim away parts of themselves until they're acceptable, digestible, safe. But your alter ego understands that you weren't born to be convenient for others. You were born to be complete, complex, and occasionally disruptive to a system that values compliance over authenticity. Every time you refuse to shrink, you show others what's possible. The greatest gift your alter ego gives you isn't power or freedom. It's permission to be unapologetically yourself in a world that wants you to apologize for existing too intensely. Isn't it fascinating how a mirror shows people exactly what they fear most about themselves? When you confidently display your alter ego, you become that mirror. People look at your confidence and see their own cowardice. They see your freedom and feel the weight of their own chains. Their reactions to your alter ego? That's just them showing you their deepest insecurities, gift-wrapped in criticism and judgment. Listen carefully when people try to tear down your alter ego. Every insult they throw is actually a confession. You're too intense means they're afraid of their own power. You're being fake means they're terrified of showing their true self. You need to tone it down means they've spent their whole life being quiet, and your voice reminds them of everything they never dared to say. Their words tell you nothing about your alter ego, but everything about their own cages. Notice how quickly the labels start flying when your alter ego makes an appearance. Narcissist, they cry. Attention seeker, they whisper. Show off, they mutter. But here's the punchline. They're desperately seeking attention too, just in more socially acceptable ways. Your alter ego simply demonstrates a level of self-acceptance they can't fathom, so they try to pathologize what they can't understand. The funnier part? Watch how their body language changes when your alter ego steps into the room. Those who preach about being real and authentic suddenly become very interested in their phones. The ones always talking about speaking their truth find themselves at a loss for words. Your alter ego shows them what real authenticity looks like, and suddenly all their pretenses about being genuine fall apart. Smart people learn to read these reactions like a book. When someone gets aggressive about your confidence, they're showing you their fear of standing out. When they mock your ambition, they're revealing their own abandoned dreams. When they question your right to be different, they're exposing their own desperate need to fit in. Your alter ego becomes a psychological diagnostic tool, revealing everyone's hidden insecurities. The really delicious part comes when they try to help you be more normal. Their advice always reveals their own programming. People won't like you if means they've built their life around being liked. You'll never succeed by means they've accepted artificial limitations as truth. You should try to fit in more means they've surrendered their uniqueness for acceptance. Every suggestion is a window into their own compromise. Pay attention to who gets the most uncomfortable around your alter ego. The loudest critics, usually the ones who've sacrificed the most of themselves to fit in. The most aggressive challengers, often those who came closest to breaking free but chose safety instead. The ones who try to save you from yourself, they're showing you exactly what they wish someone had saved them from: the pressure to conform. Want to really understand someone? Watch how they react to your alter ego's success. Those who've built their identity around playing safe will call it luck. Those who've accepted mediocrity will call it unsustainable. Those who've given up on their dreams will predict your downfall. Your achievements through your alter ego force them to confront every time they chose comfort over courage. The social food chain gets really interesting when your alter ego shows up. The self-proclaimed alphas suddenly feel threatened. The social butterflies discover their charm doesn't work on someone who sees through social games. The quiet judgers find their silent disapproval has no effect. Why? Because your alter ego exposes the fact that their social power only works on those who agree to play by their rules. Confidence hits different when it flows from your alter ego. It's not that practiced, artificial confidence that people learn in seminars. This is raw, primal certainty that radiates from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Your alter ego strips away all that social hesitation, all those learned doubts. What's left is pure, undiluted self-belief that makes others question their own certainty. Authority doesn't need badges or titles when your alter ego's in charge. Real power comes from the simple certainty that you see through the games others play. Watch how people react when they realize their usual manipulation tactics don't work on you. That moment of confusion when they notice you're not following their script. That's the birth of real influence. Your alter ego understands that true authority comes from refusing to seek permission or approval. Mystery becomes your natural state because most people can't figure out which rules you're playing by. They're used to people who either rebel completely or conform perfectly. But your alter ego, it switches between worlds effortlessly, comfortable in both chaos and order. This adaptability makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability makes you powerful. Nobody can plan against what they can't predict. Presence takes on a whole new meaning through your alter ego. It's not about being the loudest or most visible person in the room. It's about carrying yourself with such complete self-acceptance that others feel compelled to question their own masks. Your alter ego doesn't need to demand attention. It commands awareness simply by existing authentically in a world of pretense. Ever notice how a room's energy shifts when someone fully owning their power walks in? That's what your alter ego does naturally. It creates this invisible pressure that others can feel but can't quite explain. Some will call it charisma, others will call it intimidation, but really, it's just the raw force of unfiltered authenticity in a world built on filters. The unsettling effect comes from how your alter ego exposes the games people play. When you stop participating in social theater, you force others to see their own performance. It's like being the only sober person at a party. You see all the pretense, all the false bravado, all the social masks that others think are invisible. This clear vision makes them nervous because they know you can see behind their curtain. Communication changes entirely because your alter ego speaks in pure intent. No social cushioning, no unnecessary politeness, no beating around the bush. This directness is like a sharp blade cutting through the usual social fog. People aren't used to such clarity. It makes them uncomfortable because they've forgotten how to handle pure truth without all its usual social wrapping paper. Mental toughness amplifies naturally because your alter ego doesn't waste energy on social anxieties. All that power you used to spend wondering, what will they think, gets redirected into actual thinking, actual doing, actual achieving. This efficiency of mental energy creates a kind of psychological momentum that others can sense but can't quite match. Your decision-making speed accelerates because your alter ego cuts through the noise of social consideration. While others are weighing opinions, considering impressions, and managing perceptions, you're already moving. This quick, clear action often unsettles people because it shows them how much time they waste on unnecessary social calculations. Personal boundaries become unshakable because your alter ego understands that limits aren't up for negotiation. There's no need for anger or aggression, just pure, calm certainty about where you end and others begin. This kind of solid self-definition creates a force field that people can feel before they even test it. They sense that their usual boundary pushing won't work, and that realization alone changes the whole dynamic. Breaking isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far more interesting. Your alter ego emerges from these cracks, these moments when life shatters your old self into pieces. Think about how broken bones heal. They become stronger at the fracture point than they ever were before. That's what's happening inside you. Every betrayal, every failure, every moment of complete collapse becomes a point of reinforcement. Your alter ego isn't hiding these breaks. It's showcasing them as proof of your resurrection. Strength grows differently in damaged soil. Where your normal self tried to hide the scars, your alter ego understands that these marks are your credentials. Each scar tells a story of survival. Each crack shows where you refuse to shatter completely. The people who tried to break you, they didn't realize they were just helping you discover parts of yourself that only emerge under extreme pressure. Now your alter ego stands as living proof that destruction isn't the opposite of creation. It's often the beginning. Pain trains you in ways comfort never could. Your alter ego emerged from this training, learning lessons that can't be taught in safe spaces. When life stripped away everything you thought you needed, you discovered what you're actually made of. That's what intimidates people about your alter ego. It's not just strong. It's strong in ways that only come from being broken and rebuilding yourself. They see in you what they fear they couldn't survive. The transformation hits different when it comes from real damage. This isn't some motivational seminar feel-good change. This is the kind of metamorphosis that happens when life forces you to either evolve or dissolve. Your alter ego carries this evolved energy, the kind that only comes from facing complete destruction and choosing to become something new instead. That's what makes others uncomfortable. They can sense that your strength isn't theoretical. It's been tested in ways they hope they never have to face. Brokenness teaches you to read the world differently. Your alter ego sees through facades because you've learned that everything can break. Reputations, promises, certainties. This knowledge doesn't make you cynical. It makes you powerful. You stop fearing breaks because you know firsthand that broken pieces can be forged into something stronger. This understanding gives your alter ego a kind of confidence that intact people can't comprehend. Reality hits harder when you've been shattered before. Your alter ego knows that most people live in bubbles of artificial safety, pretending that if they follow the rules, life won't break them. But you've already been broken. You know the truth, that breaking isn't the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's even beautiful. This knowledge changes how you move through the world, and others can sense it